King David Studio podcast.
I want you to analyze different scenarios and give whatever opinion you want, but to empower a township 25-year-old with a degree and no job opportunities. What do you say to that 25-year-old girl or boy?
To the extent possible, volunteer at a company where possible. I say where possible. Volunteer at a company where possible. And where possible, negotiate that they just pay for your transportation.
Yeah.
Volunteer. The trick about getting a job is getting into the employment system. That's what I would say.
Just jumping in.
It's probably a story I've never told, but my very first professional job was similar to this. I worked at a company then called Digital Mall, now called Digital Solutions Group, run by a guy called Yaron. And I effectively volunteered myself into that job. I was like, I'm trying to get a gig. What do you have? He had nothing. I was like, okay, I tell you what, I've just done this public speaking thing. I know a few very powerful people in companies. If I set up meetings for you, you go in and sell your solutions and you pay me commission. And he eventually ended up employing me in a sales job. So
amazing.
Yeah, I just volunteered myself in.
Here's a similar example that people may not know. When I joined Radio 2000, not Metro, because I'd moved from Metro, and for a while I wasn't on radio. I was doing sales in radio, not the actual radio shows. And Radio 2000 had a gap, a quiet moment in the morning on Sundays. No one hosting that show. They would just play music. And I picked up on that. And I decided to record a demo tape.
Wow.
And send it to the program's manager, who put it on his desk for 3 months and did nothing.
Whoa.
Until I came across the station manager at reception. I said, have you had my demo tape? I'm looking for a gig. He said, I don't have a show. I said, you do. You have a show that has no one between 3 and 6 in the morning, every day, every Friday, Saturday morning and Sunday morning. And he said, oh,
so
yeah.
You were willing to do graveyard shift on a weekend?
On a weekend.
Wow.
And he said, okay, where's that demo? I said, it's actually in my car right now, if you don't mind. Let's just come with me and we'll just listen to it. And he walked with me to the car, played that CD. He listened. He said, okay, but I don't have money. I said, it's cool, man. I'll do that show for free.
Wow.
I did 3 to 6 Saturday and Sunday morning for a year without getting paid a cent.
Wow.
A single cent.
Wow.
That was not a good and a bad thing. The bad thing is when they started paying me, they started very low because I was moving from a 0 point.
Sure.
However, I still volunteered. Exactly the answer you just gave.
But why did you feel the urge to continue?
The love for radio was still there and I wasn't on air. After doing my 3-year, actually my 6-7 year stint at Metro as a producer, for a time, I was out of the game completely, which was a personal decision I made. I wanted to learn other aspects of the business of broadcasting. I joined sales. I enjoyed that. However, the bug was still there to do radio. And that's how I decided to record a demo tape and gave it to this guy.
I love that.
And he gave me that opportunity. And it's grown from strength to strength from that moment.
And I think that the truism there, isn't it, is that everybody who appears a success now started somewhere.
Yeah.
And I, if this ministers to any young person out there, we did not start where we are. Right.
Yeah.
And so this is why I always say this to my son. I always say he plays basketball, he plays junior NBA, and he's got like players that he looks, and I go, remember, mirror their process, not their place, just their process. What's the process that they've followed to get there? And I think it's a real truism.
Yeah.
Study the process.
What do you say to a young business person, black, male or female, who sees other businesses failing? Remember we spoke about those. We spoke about those that there was success and then there was complete destruction. What do you say to that person who is looking at this and in their mind is that this is not going to work and they want so badly either to get in or they're about to start?
So I would say, first, it will fail. All businesses fail. Let me say it this way, actually. All business models fail. Businesses don't have to. So when you are starting as an entrepreneur, your number one thing is to find the business model that's going to work. So to find that business model, you need to experiment, which means you're going to come across a few business models that fail.
Yeah.
And what I would say to them is, be gracious with yourself as you come across the business model that fails until you find the business model that succeeds and works. When we started, for instance, one of the things we were doing in our business models is we're building hubs in communities and using them to train entrepreneurs in those communities for various reasons, right? But that business model failed. We're still around because we found business models that sustained us. Yeah. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is don't personalize failure, man. Like, it failed. You didn't fail. It failed. The business failed. The product failed. The marketing failed. You didn't fail, right? And then the third thing I would say is do not believe the PR. A lot of what you see is smoke and mirrors. You know this. A lot of it is marketing. A lot of it is smoke and mirrors. Don't believe the PR. The people you think are doing well are not doing as well as you think. They all have their own difficulties and their own struggles. And the people you don't know about are probably the ones who are succeeding. So quietly. That's just one thing I've learned. Imali no tula.
Yeah.
It's I have a one of the guys in my finance team always says, don't forget, money talks, wealth whispers.
I like that.
Yeah. So just be patient. If something fails, it's not you, it's failed. Pick yourself up and don't allow what appears to be somebody else's success make you feel bad because you don't know what that person is going through.
Yeah. A family that is making a decision about their child's education and that child is about to enter into university, what narrative should be paramount to them right now about the future of that child, the future of their household, and the future of this country in relation to their child? It's a very complex question.
It's a complex question, but I would say from a selection of what to study, and I know because we're having this conversation about our oldest, is if you can, either have them study the arts, in particular arts, history, and culture, or sciences, and in particular math, sciences, and technology. I think that the world is going to arc towards these two. So I should have mentioned that I'm the chairperson of Silicon Cape. So of all of the silicons in the continent, we are the oldest silicon. Okay. So a number of the high technology startups that you know about, I've seen them come through our ranks from when there were ideas on pitch decks to companies today worth hundreds of millions of dollars on a valuation basis. And what I can tell you now is that the changes we are seeing in technology are going to change the world. And we are still massively underrepresented with young Black people, in particular young Black females, hugely underrepresented with a number of young Black females starting technology startups that are answering African problems uniquely.
Yeah.
Right. So we're doing a lot of work. That's why part of the reason why I was in Nigeria now, we're doing a lot of work in that space to try and help that demographic of people, young Black females, find space there. But the other thing we know is that people who study arts and history make for unbelievable entrepreneurs because they also have to learn things like demographics and psychology and psychometrics and how people think and all of those things. Yeah. And so we've traditionally thought that those kind of people should end up in like dramatic arts or the entertainment. But actually in business, they are very, very effective because they see the consumer as what the consumer is, which is a fully rounded human being with a set of experiences.
Not a number.
Not a number. Those of us, myself included, who studied either finance or business, we see a consumer as a number. And we're trained about the consumer in the P&L sense. But they see a consumer, they see a history, they see a background, they see an ethnographic, they see a psychographic, they see a way of thinking. And they are incredibly adept at building products that talk to those consumers.
Wow.
So people don't know the story, for instance, but the turnaround of Adidas was led by a man who came from creative arts. He wasn't a commercial person, but they sent him into Adidas when the business was dying. And he started thinking about the consumer through the psychographics of the consumer, then architecturing products, and then winning back their market share from Under Armour and Lululemon, and eventually coming back to beating Reebok again and getting to a place where they're number 2 to Nike again. Understanding, it's one of the things in South Africa we must be very careful of. We shouldn't just, do the numbers are important too, but also knowing human beings fully and completely is important. And so that's what I would say to that family.
A young couple whose money doesn't quite make sense.
In what sense?
They made bad decisions. The money is in tatters. They are in trouble financially. And it's affecting everything about them. It's affecting how they relate. It's affecting how they approach life. This is me giving different scenarios of people who are likely to consume this content.
I'm with you.
And they're curious about Vusi's take on their problem.
So the first rule of what to do when you're in a hole is to stop digging. So what you don't want to do is to replace debt with debt, because that tends to be expensive. And the second rule is face the brutal facts. This is Jim Collins' old expression, and it absolutely works. So I would say, I'll give you a personal example. I was been in exactly this situation where you overextend yourself. And one of the exercises we had to do was we wrote down all of the things that mattered and were important. And then we wrote down all of the things that were ego. And we actually realized a lot of stuff was just ego. So for instance, today, I don't have, and I'm not casting aspersions on people who do, I'm simply giving you a sense for me. I don't have a car in debt, right? In fact, I've actually got no debt. Yeah. Now, I've got credit cards, but all my credit cards are in the positive, and I put money in them and I earn the interest from the bank.
That's it.
Does that make sense?
100%.
Now, and
it's probably the best way to have a credit card.
It is the best way to have a credit card, right? And you just put more money in than you've taken out. And it's a great trick. But I learned that because when it all comes, when it all comes crashing down, it's almost as if Bajelan, and it all comes crashing down at the same time, right?
So you've had that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Had it, and recently, and had to rebuild out of that. Right.
Sure.
So today we will do simple things today. For instance, like we will pay the things that need to be paid. We'll pay them upfront. So if there's if there's money that's got to be put away for water and lights, just put it all away up front. Or, if you can pay for the medical aid, just pay it up front, or school fees paid up front. All of us, guys, like what are we talking about here? I think it's important for people to recognize that all of us are in that situation. You think water and lights is expensive here? Try water and lights in Dubai.
Sure.
I pay in dirhams. Do you know how expensive that is for a property that you're barely occupying? Right? You think rent is expensive here? What do you think my rent is at the DIFC? It's very expensive. Yeah. Does that make sense? So I want to be clear that the blessing and the weight of that blessing are equal. We are at different stages, but the weight is the same. We are seeing that this thing. And what we've learned as a family is we try to live a very simple life. We don't spend what we don't have to spend. We obviously have things we spoil ourselves on, but those are counted and calculated. And what used to be massive big expenses, I told you about my love for cars. Now it's, if I think about, there is not a single car in my garage today that is latest generation.
They're all relatively old.
All of them are either 1 generation old, 2 generations old. Thing still works. It's in great working condition. It's a phenomenal vehicle. And I don't like the fact that they're hybridizing everything. So I'm
still like the sound of...
I'm chilled. I'm still trying to get your classic SL. I'm like, that's the car. That's the car I want.
Eventually. Don't worry. Eventually, it broke a few records recently. And in some auction, it became so expensive.
Really?
Yeah, 3.5 million or something ridiculous like that. Yeah. In some auction, not my car.
Yeah, but still.
The one they had on the day. Yes. Here's a scenario of someone who's about to retire and they have 2 million rands that's coming their way. And they are not 100% sure what they're going to do. They still have a long life. As you know, we live longer.
We do.
What do you say to this guy?
First, talk to a financial advisor. Number one thing to do. Don't talk to family. Talk to a financial advisor. Certified financial planner who's with a credible institution. Make sure that they're certified. Make sure that they're licensed. Right? So that's the first thing I would say to them. The second thing I would say to them is you don't have 2 million. You don't. So I was explaining this to a young man who was introduced to me by a mutual contact. He's come into stupid money. He plays professional soccer, right? Not South African. But when I say stupid money, I mean like satisfy all your dreams money.
Yeah.
And so the contract is worth X amount. And the fellow who's introducing us, Tony, was a friend of mine. He says, I wanted him to talk to you just so he can get some sound advice. So we take down, so I said, how much money are you getting? And he gives me the figure. And how old are you? And he gives me the age. And I said, how old will you be when you retire? He gives me the age. And I said, how old do you think you'll live until? And he gives me the age. I said, right, this money, we're going to divide it over the number of months between now and when you die.
Yeah.
I said, that's how much money you've got. And actually it turned out it was like $2,300 a month. And his eyes went this big.
Like, right. I'm pretty broke.
And not just that, but he had on this massive watch. And he's like, you're telling me I just spent 4 years worth of my money on a watch? Whoa. I said, that's exactly what you did. And then I said, but worse, this is contract value, right? I said, yes. I said, this is pre-tax. Then we worked out the tax portion.
Minus.
And then his eyes went like this. And I said, so you just amortize it. You're retiring today, $2 million. How long are you going to be alive for? What kind of lifestyle do you need? Does that money meet your lifestyles? Make sure you talk to a certified financial planner. And whatever you do, don't buy anything that comes with you put in R1, you put my R5 tomorrow. There's no scheme like this. Put your money in simple, traditional instruments where it will actually preserve itself. Yeah. Just one thing I need to say. When you are younger, your object and your goal is wealth creation. When you are older and you're retiring, it's wealth preservation.
Yes.
So this is a different mindset. You need a mindset of preserving this wealth because you don't have another means of earning an income.
Because once the door is closed, it's over for you. Money-wise.
How many times have you seen that movie? Right, the umama who worked as a nurse somewhere, retired,
got 3 million. Let me tell you what they do. They build a house.
Why is that? I've never understood this.
They increase the size of the house they've lived in for a long, long time. I understand it. And you probably will get it once I try my best to explain. The aspiration remains, irrespective of your years. You continue to want to live in that big house. Your waking life did not provide you that opportunity because you use that money, that little money to the kids to school.
Gotcha.
But the dream of a house in stays with you.
I got you.
And now there's what looks like a windfall.
Got you.
It's not really because you just break it down and you get a guy in your account and you start calling people and you're asking, how much is it to
renovate?
Yeah, not renovate. When you're going to build another house on top of your house, it's not a renovation. You're reconstructing this thing.
With you.
And you start calculating, Martina, it'll cost you 1.5. You're thinking, I can afford it.
I've got 3 million.
And that's it. The money goes there. By the time you're done, it costs you 3 million, right?
But there are several problems there. The first of which is that you're going to put it into an asset where it's not going to generate any money back.
No, of course.
So it's gone.
But you don't see it that way. It takes an important life dream that you've had since you're a kid.
Which brings me to the second question. Why are you not taking that money and borrowing against that money as an asset to build a house rather than use the money to build a house?
I don't have the financial education to understand that model.
I understand.
All I know is to build this house is going to cost 2 million rands and I have 3 million rands.
I understand you.
I have it.
I understand you.
Why am I not doing it?
I understand you.
It's the most common practice you find with retirement money. It builds the dream that I've had for the past 40 years.
I'll share a personal story with you. There's a young man I mentor. So I run a mentorship stream called Club 100. It's phenomenally, he lives in Cape Town. You know what his business is? Airbnbs. So he's explaining his business to me and I go, how many Airbnb properties do you have? I think when last we chatted, he said 62.
Whoa.
And then I said to him, how many do you own? Do you know how many he owns?
Yeah.
None.
They belong to other people.
I was like, what? He says, typically what happens is these are people who have properties where they've overextended themselves or it's a second property and this property is not earning an income. And I go to them and I offer them a lease with a guaranteed income.
Yes.
Then I take those properties and I put them on Airbnb and he's created like a little brand for himself. And then he's got stuff he does with the interior design and decor stuff. And he says, that's my business model. Yeah. And now he's in Cape Town, Joburg. He just opened a few of his properties in Dubai. Oh. And he's expanding. Young South African black guy.
Imagine that.
Unbelievable. But it's to this point about whether the asset is making money or the asset is lying fallow. Right.
But remember, in the example we used, the asset is not meant to make money.
It's a self-expression.
It's meant to satisfy the heart. And you tick that box and you ask them, because the value of your house when you're older, the enjoyment of your house when you're in your 60s is way less than when you are much younger.
It's a fair point.
Yeah, you can't go up the stairs.
Sure.
You know what I mean? There's a lot of things that you
But
can
also, you're not
enjoy.
as social, right? So you're not bringing as many people into your home.
Your kids are long gone.
That's true.
They've started their own lives.
That's very good.
So they only come to your house to enjoy it once a year in December for a few days. Once in a while, they bring the kids over. The true value of that house is almost zero. However, you have ticked that box. You now have a big house in that street. Why you want to stop me from doing that?
And so now you've spent all this money. What are you going to do? Go back to work?
You can't work. You're too old. You don't have the energy. You don't have the interest. There are no jobs available for you. You're too old for these jobs that are available.
Fair point.
And you end up really just struggling through your retirement years, and you become a burden to your kids
children
and everybody else. And yet there was actually money that you could have used differently.
Wow.
Anyway, we've answered that. No job, no hope. What do you say to that kid?
No job?
No hope. You realize that that's a lot of South Africans.
It's probably most of particularly young people of color.
No job, no hope. Hopefully they'll have enough data money to watch this.
The honest answer, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I don't know because I think for those young people especially, they're also the most vulnerable because they're the ones that society takes the most advantage of. Right. It's no job, no hope.
They're not even counted when they count employment
The unemployment
figures.
statistics,
Because they're not actively searching for work.
They've given up.
So they are not in the real numbers of unemployment.
They've given up.
In South Africa. They think foreigners are taking their jobs. They think part of the solution is I could try to steal something. It might, they don't have the next money for the next meal. It's a dire situation. And not only does it affect them personally, it affects their family structure. It affects their socio-economic environment. Everything about their lives is a disaster. Sometimes it's not one person. It's not a group of people. It's a community of people. It's an entire township.
Why does it affect their family structure? Explain this.
It affects how they relate, and it stops them relating well with other people in the family. They're no longer getting along with people because into a soya shorter, it had to Vusi.
Oh my God.
You realize.
Oh my God.
You realize where it goes.
And then, of course, in society, especially if they're a male, they're also emasculated by this
environment
because you're not contributing to the society.
No. Awujoli.
Man.
Awunalutho nje. Jola nobani.
Man.
You realize the effect that it has on their whole life.
This is a ticking time bomb.
It's this article. You remember I told you about
I saw
article
this article.
at Justice Malala?
Yeah.
He talks about, are we hearing the sound of the alarm? It's actually titled, Can Anyone Hear the Fire Alarm? That's what he calls it. He says, if we are here now, we are talking about a 2% increase in GDP of the next decade. And we're cool with this. We have a serious problem.
We've got a serious issue. I agree.
Yeah, we have a serious problem of leadership.
This is, I suspect, in part why this discussion around the migration crisis in South Africa is so heated, right?
Yep.
It's and why I think however you explain it, the idea that there are, I think you get the point I'm trying to make. Like it just festers a whole host of problems that you don't want to be part of.
No. And my biggest worry about it is it's easy for us to ignore this sector until they rise.
One of the guys who does statistics for us was sharing something with me. He said that when Hitler took over Germany, it was what was called a wave of discontent, high levels of unemployment, hopelessness. The unemployment rate when Hitler took over Germany was 21%. when the United States had the Great Depression, high levels of unemployment and hopelessness, their unemployment rate was 29%. We are at 40s.
Yep.
So if you extrapolate what that means, it means we have been in crisis territory
Since 2008.
for a long time.
Yes.
For a long time.
2009. That's when we were dealing with, when the unemployment level started shooting up.
And I think one of the problems is you hear people say, like, just start a business, but start a business doing what? Because even a business needs to exist in an economy that has demand.
Yes.
And if your economy isn't growing, there isn't sufficient demand for me to supply anything. And so first you've got a labor market that is competitive, and not just competitive, not growing, and not just competitive and not growing, but I'm also competing with people where the basis of competition is not the same because, they may or may not be legally competing for this job. But in addition to this, you tell me to start a business, you make funding me very, very difficult. And to start a business doing what?
You make registering a company very difficult.
Yeah.
You realize the administrative stuff.
Just that stuff.
Yeah.
I think we have a long way to go on this. I wish I had an answer for you, but as I've gotten older, I've come to be very comfortable with saying I don't know when I don't know.
And this is, and what, at least one thing we're able to agree on is the ticking time bomb.
I think that in addition to that, it's also what concerns me as you framed it is that it's not just a ticking time bomb, but it affects a very narrow group of our society and our population. And if you follow that trend, it means that you're creating multi-generational systemic issues. Yeah. Right. So you're going to create a generation of young men who lack an identity, a generation of young women who can't relate with the world. It's a mess. You are creating a mess for yourself.
It's the cycle of poverty, some call it.
And sadly, Wena David, it's also that then as South Africans, what we do is we deal with symptoms of these things. So you deal with drug abuse or alcoholism or I don't like the phrase, but gender-based violence. And you start dealing with each of these, which tend to be symptomatic of what the actual core issue is.
Yeah.
It's a tough one.
King David Studio Podcast.